There is a part of you that people use against you every single day. You do not see it, you do not feel it happening, but it is there, visible, exposed, and available to anyone paying attention. It is not your weakness. It is not your kindness. It is something far more dangerous. It is your predictability. If someone can watch you for 10 minutes and know exactly how you will respond to pressure, to silence, to praise, to delay, they do not need force. They do not need authority. They do not need to raise their voice. They already own the next move you are going to make. And the worst part is this: you are handing it to them willingly every single day without realizing what it costs you. Niccolo Machiavelli understood this 500 years ago. He watched princes fall and empires collapse, not because of weak armies, but because of readable rulers. And what he discovered about power has never stopped being true. Most people believe that control requires force. They picture dominance as something loud, commands, threats, visible authority. But Machiavelli saw something different. He watched the courts of Renaissance Italy, where the most dangerous figures never raised their voices. They observed, they waited, they studied the emotional patterns of everyone around them, and then they moved precisely at the exact moment their target was most exposed. Control does not begin with authority. It begins with emotional pattern recognition. When someone knows that criticism makes you defensive, they will criticize you, not to correct you, but to steer you. When someone learns that silence makes you anxious, they will go quiet, not because they have nothing to say, but because your anxiety gives them leverage. This is not theory. This is the operating system of every manipulative relationship, every toxic workplace, every power dynamic where one person consistently bends another. And the mechanism is always the same. Your reactions become visible, your patterns become mapped. And once your pattern is mapped, your direction can be chosen by someone else. Machiavelli wrote in The Prince that the one who adapts his policy to the times prospers. But the reverse is equally true. The one whose reactions never change becomes the easiest person in the room to control. This is not about becoming cold. This is about becoming aware of a war that is already happening. One you have been losing because no one told you it existed. The reason this works, the reason emotional predictability is so devastating, goes deeper than most people realize. It begins in childhood. From the moment you could speak, you were trained to externalize your internal state. Cry and someone responds, smile and someone rewards, show anger and someone adjusts. Your emotional transparency was not just tolerated, it was demanded. The people around you needed to read you in order to manage you. And so you learned, at the deepest level, that showing your emotions was the way to get your needs met. But Machiavelli observed something that most psychology still dances around. What works in a family does not work in a court. What keeps you safe as a child makes you vulnerable as an adult. The emotional openness that once brought you care now brings you exposure. Consider what happens in a negotiation. The person who shows eagerness pays more. The person who shows desperation accepts less. The person who reveals their deadline loses their leverage. Every visible emotion becomes a data point, and data points become handles. Machiavelli watched Cesare Borgia navigate some of the most treacherous political waters in European history. Borgia was not the strongest military commander. He was not the wealthiest prince, but he was, by every account, nearly impossible to read. His allies could not predict his next alliance. His enemies could not predict his next strike. And that uncertainty, that gap between what people expected and what actually came, was the source of his power. The mechanism is simple. When people cannot predict your emotional response, they cannot design pressure that works on you. They cannot craft the insult that will land. They cannot time the compliment that will disarm you. They are operating blind. And a blind opponent is not an opponent at all. Think of it like a lock. Every automatic reaction you have, every flinch, every rushed explanation, every visible frustration, is a tumbler falling into place. Give someone enough tumblers and they have the combination. They open you without force, without confrontation, without you ever realizing you were picked. The root cause is not that you are weak. The root cause is that you were never taught the difference between emotional honesty and emotional exposure. Honesty is choosing to share what you feel. Exposure is being unable to stop it from showing. One is a gift, the other is a vulnerability. And until you learn the difference, every relationship you enter will be shaped by whoever reads you first. Tell me in the comments, which of your emotional reactions do you suspect has been used against you the most? The defensiveness, the eagerness to explain, or the need to be understood? Write it below. Naming the pattern is the first step to breaking it. Subscribe if you want to keep going. What comes next changes how you see every interaction you have. Now that you understand the mechanism, you need to see where it lives in your actual life. Because this is not abstract. It is happening in specific, recognizable moments, and once you see them, you will never unsee them. The first handle is instant defense. Someone questions your decision, and before they finish their sentence, you are already explaining. Not because the explanation is needed, but because the accusation triggered something deep. A fear of being wrong, of being misunderstood, of being seen as incompetent. The person watching does not hear your explanation. They hear your fear, and now they know exactly where to press next time. The second handle is over-explanation. You say yes to something, and then you keep talking. You justify. You add context. You offer reasons no one asked for. Every extra sentence is a confession. It says, I am not sure this decision can stand on its own. Strategic communicators say less than they know. You are saying more than you feel, and it costs you credibility every single time. The third handle is emotional transparency under praise. Someone compliments you and your entire posture changes. You soften. You open. You become more agreeable in the minutes that follow. This is one of the oldest influence techniques in recorded history. Machiavelli noted that flattery was the weapon of choice in every court because it worked on nearly everyone. When praise visibly changes your behavior, you have shown the room that approval is your currency. And anyone holding that currency now holds a piece of your direction. The fourth handle is anxiety in silence. A conversation pauses. Someone does not respond immediately, and inside you something tightens. You fill the gap. You ask if everything is okay. You send the follow-up message. You interpret the absence as rejection. But silence is not always a message. Sometimes it is a test. The person who panics in silence reveals that they depend on external validation to feel stable. That dependence is a handle, one of the most reliable ones. The fifth handle is visible frustration. When pressure makes you visibly agitated, a sharper tone, a clenched jaw, a rushed response, you have just confirmed that the pressure works. And anything that works gets repeated. Your frustration is not a boundary. It is an invitation to push harder. The sixth handle is premature disclosure. You share your plans before they are secure. You announce intentions before you have built the foundation to support them. You tell people what you are going to do, and in doing so, you give them the map to where you are going and every road they could block along the way. Machiavelli was explicit about this. He wrote that a prince should never reveal his full intent, because the moment direction is known, opposition organizes. What is true for princes is true for you. Every premature disclosure is an invitation for interference. The seventh handle is the need to be understood. This is the deepest one. It drives all the others. You explain yourself because you need the other person to see your reasoning. You defend yourself because you need them to acknowledge your logic. You overshare because you believe that if they just understood you, truly understood, they would treat you differently. But here is what Machiavelli knew, and what most people never accept. Understanding is not required for respect. In fact, the people who command the most respect in any room are almost never the most understood. They are the most composed. They are the ones whose internal world remains their own. The need to be understood is the master handle. It is the one that opens all the others. And releasing it is the single most powerful thing you will ever do for your psychological freedom. This is the core of everything Machiavelli teaches about power, and it is not what most people expect. The popular image of Machiavelli is a man who taught deception. But what he actually taught was something far more useful. He taught structural self-awareness. He taught that power is not something you take from others. It is something you stop giving away. The framework begins with a single principle. the separation of feeling from action. You will always feel. Anger will arise, fear will arrive, the desire for approval will surface. These are not weaknesses, they are human. But the moment feeling becomes automatic action, the moment anger becomes a raised voice, fear becomes avoidance, the need for approval becomes compliance, you have lost the gap. And the gap is everything. Between what you feel and what you do, there is a space. Most people have never been taught that this space exists. They experience emotion and response as a single event, one thing, fused together, inseparable. But they are not one thing, they are two. And the distance between them is where your freedom lives. Machiavelli observed that the most effective rulers were not the ones who felt the least. They were the ones who acted last. Cesare Borgia felt rage. Historical accounts describe his temper in vivid detail, but his actions rarely matched the timing of his emotions. He would receive an insult and respond days later, not with anger but with a strategic repositioning that left his opponent exposed. The delay was not weakness. The delay was the weapon. This is what separates reactive people from strategic ones. The reactive person treats every emotional surge as a call to action. The strategic person treats it as information, useful but not yet actionable. When you pause before responding, three things happen. First, you break the other person's timing. Every provocation is designed with an expected response window. When you do not respond within that window, the provocation loses its force. The aggressor expected a flinch. They got stillness. Now they have to recalculate, and recalculation introduces doubt. Second, you gain access to your own clarity. The first thought that arrives under pressure is almost never your best thought. It is your fastest thought. Speed and quality are different things entirely. The pause gives your deeper intelligence time to surface, the part that sees the full board, not just the piece that moved. Third, you signal something that language cannot communicate. When you do not react instantly, you communicate that this moment does not control you. That signal is read by every person in the room, consciously or not. It changes how they position themselves relative to you. It changes what they are willing to try. If this shift has landed for you, if you can feel the difference between reacting and choosing, a like puts this in front of someone who is still trapped in the automatic loop. The second layer of the framework is what Machiavelli called the art of appearing. He wrote that everyone sees what you appear to be. Few experience what you really are. This is not a call to deception. It is a call to selective visibility. You do not owe the world a transparent view of your inner state. You do not owe every conversation your full emotional truth. You do not owe anyone the map to your vulnerabilities simply because they asked a question. Strategic opacity means choosing what is visible and what remains private, not out of fear, but out of self-respect. Consider how this works in practice. Someone asks you about your plans. Instead of detailing every step, you share the conclusion, not the path. Someone asks you how you feel about a decision. Instead of narrating your internal conflict, you state your position. Clean, brief, final. This is not dishonesty. This is boundary. The difference between a person who is controlled and a person who is untouchable is not intelligence, courage, or resources. It is information management. The untouchable person controls what others have access to. The controlled person lets information flow freely and wonders why people always seem to have leverage. Machiavelli watched this pattern destroy more rulers than any army ever did. The prince who confided in the wrong advisor. The general who revealed his strategy to an ally who was secretly negotiating with the enemy. The leader who shared his doubts publicly and watched his authority dissolve overnight. Information is not neutral. In the hands of someone with different interests, your information becomes their advantage. Treat your internal world accordingly. Here is where the transformation lives, and it is not where you expect it. Most people hear Machiavelli and think the lesson is about becoming harder, colder, more guarded, more ruthless. But that is the surface reading. The deeper truth is almost the opposite. What Machiavelli actually teaches, when you read past the reputation and into the structure, is that you do not need to become someone else. You need to stop abandoning yourself in the presence of others. Every time you rush to explain yourself, you abandon your own position to occupy someone else's expectation. Every time you react instantly to provocation, you abandon your own rhythm to match someone else's tempo. Every time you reveal your plans to gain approval, you abandon your own timeline to satisfy someone else's curiosity. The pattern is not about them. It is about you leaving yourself. And the reframe is this: becoming unreadable is not about hiding. It is about returning home. It is about staying inside your own center when the world tries to pull you out of it. It is about choosing your responses instead of having them chosen for you. It is about treating your inner life as something that belongs to you, not as public property that anyone can access on demand. This is not coldness. This is the deepest form of self-loyalty. Machiavelli was not teaching cruelty. He was teaching sovereignty. Sovereignty over your reactions. Sovereignty over your disclosures. Sovereignty over the version of yourself that the world gets to see. And when you reclaim that sovereignty, when you stop performing your emotions and start governing them, something remarkable happens. The people who used to push you start hesitating. The dynamics that used to drain you start shifting. The relationships that were built on your predictability either transform or dissolve. Either outcome is a gain, because what replaces them is something you may never have experienced. A life where your next move belongs to you. Understanding this changes nothing if it stays intellectual. The shift must live in your body, in your speech, in the micro decisions you make 40 times a day. Here is how you begin. The first practice is the deliberate pause. For the next 7 days, add a 3-second gap before every response that matters. Not every casual exchange, but every moment where you feel the internal surge. Someone criticizes you. 3 seconds. Someone asks you to justify a choice. 3 seconds. Someone goes silent and you feel the pull to fill the space. 3 seconds. In those 3 seconds, ask one question. What does my best response look like? Not your fastest response, not your most defensive response, your best one. This practice rewires the fusion between feeling and action. It builds the gap that Machiavelli's most effective figures operated from. 3 seconds is small enough to be invisible to others and large enough to change your entire trajectory. The second practice is verbal reduction. Most people use twice as many words as the moment requires. Starting now, cut your explanations in half. When you feel the urge to justify, stop at the first complete sentence. When someone asks why, give one reason, not 4. This is not about being rude. It is about recognizing that every unnecessary word is an open window into your internal state. Fewer words, fewer handles. Brevity does not make you cold. It makes you composed. And composition is the language of authority. Machiavelli noted that the princes who spoke least were feared most, not because silence is threatening, but because it is unreadable. When you stop narrating your inner world, people are forced to deal with your position instead of your feelings. And your position is far harder to manipulate. The third practice is the weekly exposure audit. At the end of each week, sit quietly for 10 minutes and ask yourself 3 questions. Where did I react automatically this week? What did I reveal that I did not need to reveal? Where did someone's behavior change mine without my conscious permission? Write the answers. Do not judge them. Simply see them. This practice does something no amount of reading can accomplish. It makes your patterns visible to you, the same way they are already visible to the people around you, because you cannot protect what you cannot see. And right now, there are patterns in your behavior that others are reading clearly while you remain unaware. The audit closes that gap. Over weeks, you will start catching the patterns in real time instead of in reflection. That is the transition from understanding to mastery. That is the moment you stop being readable, not because you are hiding, but because you are finally paying attention to what you have been showing. Remember where we started. There is a part of you that people use against you, not your weakness, not your kindness, your predictability. But now you know something you did not know 10 minutes ago. You know where the handles are. You know how they are read. You know why they exist. And most importantly, you know that the gap between feeling and action is real, available, and yours to claim. Machiavelli did not write The Prince for the powerful. He wrote it for the vulnerable. For anyone who had ever been outmaneuvered by someone who simply understood the game better than they did. Now you understand the game. The question was never whether you could become untouchable. The question was whether anyone would ever show you how. And now that you have seen it, the only thing left is the decision to begin. Not tomorrow, not when conditions are perfect, now. In the very next conversation, in the very next silence you are tempted to fill. In the very next moment, someone reaches for a handle that is no longer there. That moment is yours. Subscribe if you want to keep building this. There is more of this coming, and it goes deeper every time. No one can control you once you stop handing them the controls. Thank you for being here. I will see you in the next one.